We're back.
We're back.
Welcome to Paré Paré. This is a podcast in which we discuss architecture, watches, cars, design, things that all have a through line that are important to me and also to you. Today we have a great guest. We have Dan Brunn today. Dan is an architect, a car collector, a design savant. Dan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
This is going to be really exciting. And I think for a lot of listeners or people who are going to watch the video, I think they are always intrigued by finding new people. And at least when it comes to me, when I found you, I was like, this guy is awesome.
Thank you.
You know what I mean?
What they might find today is the couple of dogs here too. So
yes,
if there's going to be a slight interruption, it is what it is, guys.
There are two lovely dogs here today. So if there's any background from that, we apologize. But we're just hanging out.
Yes.
Speaking of hanging out, we are in the Bridge House, which is a house that you designed, you facilitated, you were the architect of the home. Can you just tell us a little bit about the Bridge House?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is now, we completed it around 2019. It's my personal residence, and it's something that I designed as a way to showcase our design thought, really. And it's a net zero house, which means that, you know, the energy that's being consumed is the energy that's being produced. It's the same. It's got a ton of solar on the roof. It's about net sustainability and showing people that you could have clean, aesthetic, and beautiful design without having to forego ecology.
Yeah.
And it should be one in one. It should be together, you know? So that is really what this house is about, and it's showing and showcasing people that it can happen naturally. And the house itself is designed in such a way to literally bridge nature. That's the idea, right? So we're in a room that is, you know, connected to nature. The house is 210 feet long, 20 feet wide. The site is 260 feet long, 60 feet wide. And the house is situated in such a way that you just have an abundance of nature no matter where you're at.
Yeah, and I think that is something that's evident from the moment that you come up to the home. I mean, you see that rustic gate, right? The gate opens, and then you're instantly transformed to a space of nature, right? You have all this greenery and these windows, like these windows are so massive, and you're just seeing all of the plants and the nature. And then you have this beautiful sculpture here. It's just like, it's a refuge, you know?
And actually, you know, when we take on residential architecture for clients, that's one of the things that we talk about. We talk about, let's aim for not another house, let's aim for a place of retreat. Let's aim, like, show me your best resort that you stayed at or you aspire to stay at. Let's not look at another house as inspiration. That's not, you're not shooting high enough, is what I think.
So speaking of architecture, obviously you're an architect. You have your own firm. Can you just give us a little bit of an overview of your background as an architect and some of the things that you're proud of?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you know, as a kid, I was lucky enough to know what I wanted to do or become, I think, since 7 years old.
Wow.
So this has like been a thing for me, and it started out as, you know, with iconic Legos, right? I was a kid who grew up in Tel Aviv, and we would have, my grandpa would bring me these Lego Technics, and I wouldn't follow the instructions. I mean, I was 7 years old, and he was bringing me things for a 13-year-old boy, and I was like, I don't even know how to deal with this. And in the end, I ended up just building these like fantasy cities, actually.
Yeah.
It was more akin to something you would see in Blade Runner than architecture. I was just like dreaming up these crazy scenarios. But I think my roots really defined who I am. You know, like for those who don't know, Tel Aviv is a UNESCO World Heritage Site for the most amount of Bauhaus architecture in the world. You know, so I was surrounded by the international style of architecture. You know, just clean lines, less is more, purposeful design. Everything had a reason. You didn't have a frivolous thing. And I remember coming to the States, and all of a sudden the house that I grew up in, you know, it was like this Spanish style, Mediterranean, whatever. I don't even know what it is, right? And I remember coming home and asking my mom, like, why do I have to turn the lights on? That was abnormal, right? The house that I grew up in just worked with the sun, just like this house does. And all of a sudden it was like, you're in LA and the windows are like tiny. Like what is going on?
Yeah.
And so now I think it's funny, as the fad to do California living, indoor, outdoor, mid-century modern, all these things that have now just become like hit words.
Yeah.
That was how I grew up. So
Yeah.
I can't disassociate the two, so if somebody asks about, style, I'm like, no, or this isn't it. This is a way of life. It's not a new fad that now you have to like pick up on. So that to me is curious, and it's interesting to me to see how other architects or aficionados, what they value in that versus the trueness of what it is to live in that.
No, I think what you're saying, I want to hone in on something you said because I think it's important. This idea of people acting like this is new, like this is some trend or whatever. Like, no, good architecture, good design, living indoor, outdoor, using light. That's something that's been done for many, many years. And I like to think about that a lot in my own life and how I view my, my outlook. I like to have an appreciation for the past. I like to really focus on the things that have been done because it's like a lot of people will come to things and think, oh, this is brand new, or like, oh, this, a lot of people, like, for instance, I'm looking at this beautiful G-Wagen that's like really distracting. I can't stop looking at this G-Wagen, and the G-Wagons are really hot. So Dan has a G320 G-Wagon back before they were even allowed to be imported to the United States. So this vehicle would have been a European vehicle. And now everyone drives a G-Wagon, right? Yeah. G-Wagons are like a luxury item. Like, if they're like a Beverly Hills staple. That's a true G-Wagon to me. Right. So it's like that idea.
Yeah. I mean, and what you said is true. There's a lot of history to it. And, as I mentioned, history is important. And a part of my education, and I lived a while in Italy, and when people ask me, oh, you don't like Italianate stuff? I absolutely do. In the right context, at the right century.
Yeah.
We're in 2024 right now. Let's live in the now. That's my thing, and appreciate what we have and appreciate the past. And there's no need to replicate the past, right? We're living, and the easiest way for me to pinpoint it is an arch. Okay, when you look at old architecture, the arch was high tech. People don't realize that. That is what they could get away with. It was a way to make a span. How do you span 20 feet? You make an arch. That was the only way. How do you make a big roof? You make a dome. That was the only way. It's structurally intrinsic to that. And so today, if you were to make new architecture with an arch, what's behind it is a standard moment frame. It's a standard steel structure. So you get these windows that you have here, and then why would you obstruct them with fake armature? Not only that, it's the proportions aren't correct.
Right.
So you've thrown everything out the window. I love historic stuff, and we've done some projects, and we're doing more of it now, which is really fun. We have clients who reach out to us, to renovate their historic buildings. Yeah. And we add our flair, but we make sure that it's coherent, right? So you could really read like, this is old, this is new, and that you have to do that.
Speaking of projects, I want to dive into a couple of the projects that you've done, and you've done many, many, many projects. Your firm, DBA Associates, but I want to dig into what may be your most famous project. I don't know, maybe that's my words, but the flip-flop house. Can you tell us about the flip-flop house?
So this is an amazing story of opportunity and meeting people at the right place at the right time. So I graduated from grad school in 2005. Came back to Los Angeles. It wasn't a planned thing, actually. And we were hired to do a showroom up in San Francisco for a company called Caesarstone. And as it happened, the client at the end of it, they invested $500,000 at the time. It was 20 years ago. It was a lot of money.
Yeah.
And the idea was to get the press, right? So they hired me, let's do the design. And they didn't have in their budget, how do I say, to have a photographer. Okay. And I was like, oh my God, what are we going to do? And in undergrad, I had taken architectural photography. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to do this. I bought an old 4x5 camera, and I said, let's do it. But what happened, and how Flip Flop House came to be, was I had a portfolio of like photos that I had taken with my 35mm camera, and I went to the counter here at Sammy's Camera in Fairfax to rent equipment. And I was like, okay, I got the 45, I got the 4x5 camera, I got this. What lighting do I help me out here?
Yeah.
Because they have the best service department. And the guy started speaking to me and telling me stuff. And then as I was doing that, this woman walked up to the counter and kind of cut in front of me, felt like.
Okay.
And I was like, what's going on? And the clerk turns to the lady, hey, Hetty, and he goes, you've been looking for an architect, meet Dan. And she goes, I just bought a virgin piece of property on the beach. Are you interested in designing something? And that's how that project happened. She asked me where I went to school, a little bit more like that. And all of a sudden, I'm at a corner lot in Venice Beach. And then she interviewed me for a while, which was interesting. And I was just getting my architecture license at the same time.
Okay.
And she came, and it was one of those, all of our projects. Yeah, it's one thing to understand. It's they're commissions, right? So I'm an artist waiting for my patron. It's constantly like that. Bridge House is the anomaly, and she got it. She looked at my ethos, my previous work, and she understood the Bauhaus sentiment. And she said to me, she wants two things. Number one, three things. Views. Two, wraparound balconies, which are again reminiscent of my hometown. Bauhaus movement has these big balconies, these long cantilevers.
Yep.
And a shower that has privacy while a view to the beach. And I was like, okay, let's get it done. So I get the project and I come back to my studio, not to my studio, actually, to my apartment that I was renting a room from a friend of mine.
Okay.
And I was like, now what do I do? I have never designed a 3-story house, a 3-story project.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is a lot, the structure of it a lot. And I just reckon back to again, kind of history and studying what I learned, and okay, let's do it. My attitude is always, let's do it. Figure it out later, but just get the job, get the problem, solve it. And one of the coolest things, and the reason, I'm not sure if you're familiar, but this is a good story about why the naming Flip Flop House. So essentially what it was midway through the design, we had all this glass here on the beach, you have a view towards the ocean. She says, well, we have a collection of art prints and photography, we need walls. And I'm like, well, walls is the antithesis of views, of glass, right?
Yeah.
What are we going to do with that?
Yeah.
And so then I came up with this idea of having these walls that pivot. And there are 4 of them, and they're each about, 10 foot by 10 foot, and they turn. And you can imagine when you turn them at 35 degrees, if you're standing at the end, you have views out because they open up. The other direction, they create wall space. Mm-hmm. And actually at Bridge House, when I showed you earlier the pass, through it has a similar kind of notion. And it became kind of an iconography of DBA. And we've kind of perfected it as the years went on. The idea of flip-flop is that the doors flip-flop, right? You're at the beach, you wear your flip-flops. But also, to me, funny enough, at the same time when Obama was running for president, everybody was calling him a flip-flopper.
Okay.
And so to me, again, you're talking about history, right?
Yeah.
It's like, how do I put all this together? And I try to bring comedy into anything that I do, right? So I'll never forget that. So in order to date it, I'm like, when was Obama president? When Flip-Flop House was, being designed or something like that. It creates a moment for me.
It's such an expansive property, and it's, correct me if I'm wrong, it's pretty big, right? It's
the house itself is about 5,700 square feet, which is large.
That's huge.
It's large, yeah.
For LA, that's a pretty big house. And it has a big footprint. But when you because there's the boardwalk there, and people can see it. I think what's interesting is that a lot of times architecture, people want to be private, right? They want to have their own space. But there's something nice when you can see a really significant architectural home right off the street. So for me, I like to go to the Hunt House in Malibu, right there on Malibu Road. And I'll just pull up in my car and just admire it, right? You can do that with the Hunt House. You can do that with the Flip Flop House. I mean, it's there, right? It's on display. And I think there's something special about that.
Well, I take a big responsibility on all the pieces of architecture that we do because of that.
Yeah.
Right? You are influencing the urban fabric, and people look at that. And that's important to recognize how permanent, I design for permanence. So it's in terms of you talk about let's say trends or styles or anything. No, it's got to circumnavigate against it. So actually, quite honestly, after Flip Flop House was done, if ever I had a bad week, bad day, Trevor, I would just drive to the beach and look at that. And I'll just be like, okay, this is a really shining, proud moment. And I would just like, okay, like, I'm fortunate enough to get like clients that want to see my vision come to life. And it's an amazing feeling, honestly. It's really powerful.
I think that is powerful, and you have to have reminders because, like, you know, life has setbacks. You have highs and lows, of course. I think for me, you know, I moved here to be an actor, right? That was my dream. It didn't happen. I changed my path, but like I'll drive down some of the streets that I used to drive down when I was, you know, pretty broke and I had, you know, no options and all these things. And like now I drive down them and I feel a lot different, right? And I feel I like to go visit my old buildings where I used to live, and I'll go pull up, you know, in one of the cars and I'll just think for a minute and be like, you know what? It's like a reminder. It's a physical embodiment, but I think having created something that's out there, like, because I don't create in that way, but that has to be just so significant to be like, I made that thing right there. I made that.
It's an incredible feeling, Trevor. And you know, an existential part of me always says that it's simple. You know, people ask, what's the meaning of life? Creating. And you don't have to be creative. I want to say that. You don't have to be creative to create. This podcast is a creation, right? And you're leaving a mark, and somebody can be influenced by it. It's important. So it's important for anybody in any field to do something. I think that would create, besides creating your deep pockets. Right. I think that's my point. Yeah. It's like, yes, let's not skirt around it. Money does, you know, make your life better, easier, you know, even getting to healthcare, right? You're in America. It's important. So I'm not going to say that money is bullshit. Like, it's important.
Yeah.
However, all the money in the world isn't the secret to life. And I think that's what I'm getting at. I think that I'm lucky enough that in my field, I do get to create. I get to start off with a blank slate, and all of a sudden, there's an idea. Right now, we're starting a coffee shop project. And we met with the founders, and we had this incredible moment. And you know, I came back to the studio, and you know, I turned to the project architect, and I said, "This is what we're gonna do." And all of a sudden, you know, a few days later, you have something on paper. Yeah, it's incredible. It's an incredible feeling.
It is. I want to pivot now because again, another one of your projects. But let's talk about Funke. Okay, this is a new restaurant in Los Angeles. Beautiful, beautiful restaurant that your firm did. Can you tell us about that project?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I think what we're getting at too is, you know, I like the idea of being on touch point to people, right? To humanity, to society. So yeah, we talked about residences. Internally, they do something, and to the city urban fabric, they do something else. Yeah. Hospitality design, to me, is even more vital. And I find that culinary experiences and eating are intimate experiences. You know, it's almost like taking somebody into your bedroom. It's a big deal to me to be able to sit down and have a meal with somebody. So when we were hired to design this space, you know, I was so excited. Well, first of all, Chef Evan Funke is a genius to his own right.
Yeah, you know, Felix is a great restaurant. So I get what you're saying. Great chef.
Great chef. He's incredible. You know, so. You know, it was an incredible moment. We basically, what ended up, how the synthesis of this project happened is we were hired to design the exterior of the building originally. And it's this beautiful Art Deco 1920s building. And an incredible visionary, Kurt Rappaport of West Side Estate Agency, hired us. And it was an amazing opportunity for me. And it's this 20,000 square foot building that we got to touch. And as it happened, you know, he asked me like, "Hey, let's divide up the spaces." You know, it's his first retail commercial entity development, and we were cutting them up. And he says, "Maybe this is a restaurant, maybe this," and then we started to think about it being a restaurant. And he invited Chef Evan Funke to come in one day, and so I'm standing there on the mezzanine, and I'm looking down, and he's there, and I'm like, "This is amazing." Again, like the idea of collaborating with somebody who I see as, you know, one of the tops and will be known for that, right? Yeah. To be able to basically explore what the culinary voyage would be in a visual manner is, I love that. And so that's what we tried to do, right? So my thinking about that space was, okay, he's doing this handmade pasta, which is one of a kind. And, we're talking about Italy. So I went back in my mind thinking about my time in Italy. And how do you design a place that's contemporary and, as we talked about, for today, but still has some kind of semblance of Italy?
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to look like an Italian restaurant like people do, right? Like I don't know how to better describe it. It's about the ambiance. It's about the experience,
right?
And so to me, one of the things, and to any visitor who goes there, check it out next time. Think about it this way, but it's a voyage of spaces in the same way that you would have walking through a medieval Italian city. And the way that I describe that is you have the narrow streets. They're really tight and narrow and confining. And then all of a sudden you have your piazzas. And so the restaurant is designed in such a way. You walk in and you have the big piazza, and then you got to go into a small little corridor to go up the stairs to discover the next piazza, which is the mezzanine bar. And then you go up another set of stairs, and then you get to this beautiful bridge that connects you into the outdoor rooftop.
Yeah.
But even that is an experience because you are taken through this kind of like bridge long corridor. You are about 3 feet higher than everybody else.
Yeah.
And you get to make that grand entrance, right? It's Beverly Hills.
Yeah.
You have to feel luxury. You have to feel glamorous. You have to feel large. And so that's the idea behind the restaurant. And then, of course, there's incredible materials, and we collaborated with an interior decorator, interior designer, Clint Nicholas, and it was an amazing experience. He came with these materials. We went back and forth. We even the chef, we talked to him. Everybody. It was a really nice working experience, and I think that ethos permeates the design, and you could see it. And when you're a visitor, you feel it.
Yeah, well, the space is gorgeous, and I think a lot of in today's world, let's be honest, a lot of times, I'm not saying at all that you came with this point of view, but people want moments, right? They want it to be like, how can I post this on Instagram? How can I share this in a way that people are sharing some amazing shots from that space. And from an exterior point of view, I used to drive by there every day because it was right on my way to work. And I was seeing the progression and seeing the building from the exterior point of view. It is so stunning. And I'm so glad that the architecture was able to be restored and kind of brought to life, because in LA, so often people just tear things down and start over. And I know sometimes you have to, but I'm of the point of view that I would prefer it to be saved. So I think that's special about the project.
I would do anything in my power to keep structures and not demolish them. And actually what's interesting on this one is the corner that's next to the 76 Unical station, if you guys are familiar, has that big swooping roof.
Yeah,
so
that's one of the most beautiful gas stations.
Oh, that gas station was supposed to be in LAX, by the way.
Oh, really?
It was supposed to be next to the Experience Center.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and then it got moved, it got shuffled. I forgot the exact history, but that's why it's there. And the corner of the building that we got to renovate, and where actually Funke, that corner that it sits in, was actually at one point was demolished. And the previous tenant destroyed the facade and ruined everything. And we had to do historic research into libraries and find out what was some of the building. And we took some liberties, but we masked it and made it look like the building continues. That was the idea.
It looks like that. It does. Yeah. So that worked.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we're lucky that the building developer also wanted to do this, right? Because somebody else could have demolished the building and built a 4-story building in that corner. Easy, but they didn't want to. And they created, I think, an icon.
It is. Last project I want to hit on, Tangerine.
Okay.
So a lot of people who listen to the podcast know this, but I love mid-century design, clean aesthetic, just like as much glass as possible, like very Palm Springs vibes. Tangerine, and I was telling you this before we started recording. If someone was like, hey, you have a blank check, what do you want to do? It would be that house. It is so good, Dan.
Thank you.
It is just unbelievable. Can you just give us just share a little bit about that
That's
project?
a lot, and thank you for that. And, it takes a visionary client to trust you and to be able to get you somewhere. So Amy is somebody that I've known for a really long time, that I met actually through my sister. So, you just never know where these things come from in my field. And she had hit us up years prior for a different project. Mm-hmm. And I walked through it and I was like, it just won't make sense. It won't make sense. The investment and what you come out with just doesn't make sense. And she's like, okay, fine, let's go back to the drawing board. And she ended up, we ended up starting on this other project.
Okay.
And again, she's got this great style and great understanding of color theory and texture. And so I think that's why this project is so vibrant. She allowed us to do what we do, mm-hmm. and then stepped in and painted on top of that with her own style. And the kitchen too. And it's a very, very, very proud moment of mine in that house, the kitchen. Yeah. Often do I see these mid-century homes. Let's be honest, the original kitchens weren't good. Okay, they're beautiful to look at, right. But they're just rubbish to use on a day-to-day basis. They're just not good. Granted, if you see one that's in great condition, please don't demolish it. There's no reason to do that. But a lot of them were updated in the 80s, and they're just not good.
Yeah.
So we were given an opportunity to design something, and I think through, again, she let us. She explained her function. And then I led through figuring out how she lives with her family, mm-hmm. seeing her kid and her husband and what's their routine like. And we responded back to that. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a proud moment of mine because the kitchen definitely is contemporary, but also doesn't stand out. It's part of the whole architecture and it's muted. It's got a few touches here and there, and they're very feminine. And, we got like this like bronze hardware, and it's stunning. I really love it. And then and then all of our furnishings in there, and to your point, the glass was a big deal. How do we articulate that, and how do we make that as part of the design, part of the mid-century ethos, all that terrazzo, but again, I think it goes back to what we started with. I grew up in a house similar to that. It wasn't as extravagant, but it had the big sliding glass windows. It had terrazzo floors. It had an open plan. These are normal things for me.
That's special. I mean, I think, and that's something that's been lost because I want to focus on this. So now, because of how much architecture costs, how much homes cost, these things now have become for the privileged. But mid-century design, as we know, this well, was meant to be designed for the masses, and unfortunately, that has been lost now in this new world that we live in. But you know what? I want to pivot to cars because the listeners know this, you know this. I am just obsessed with cars. I love cars, and I'm talking to a car collector here. And so we got to talk cars.
Absolutely.
So I want to set this up. When I walked through the gate, you've got the 993 out front, which is red. You've got the silver G-Wagen coupe, and then you've got the garage door up. I was almost speechless. It's like this is so me. Then you've got the E30 M3 in the garage, and the G-Body 911. And again, that's just part of the deal. But let's focus on these four cars. I don't even know where to start. Where did your love for Porsche begin? Was there a moment where like you were a kid and you saw one, or maybe someone you knew had one?
Absolutely. So, so again, I grew up in Tel Aviv, and when I was there was, in the whole country, there was one Porsche.
Really?
One. You have to understand that it was, a lot of like socialist ideals, like a prime minister or a head of state would, or, a CEO or a doctor would have a Volvo 240. That's what you would do. That you wouldn't do more than that. We had nothing. A Peugeot 205 GTI was the highlight of my life. If you would see one of those, I'm like, wow, and I still love them. And so, I came to the States in 86, and all of a sudden, I'm here in Los Angeles, and those cars were just a dime a dozen.
Yeah.
In a way, here. And they were just like, I'm like, what is this? This is insane. I'm like, this is... So the kid in me just like went ballistic. And, I was playing Outrun and Test Drive, and these were the cars that were on there.
Yeah.
It was a Ferrari Testarossa, and it was a turbo Porsche G-Body, 930, and a few other cars. But then, okay, here's the truth. So when I moved here, didn't speak English. And during recess, it felt quite lonely and in school. And there was another kid, Ken Takahashi, and he would sit with me, and we would draw cars. And draw cars was our way of communicating. You don't have to speak a language, right? That's the language is there. It's wheels and shapes and size and all that stuff. And I learned how to draw them, by heart in a way.
Yeah.
And one thing is actually when I applied, though I said the Legos and it was a part of architecture, when I applied to school in undergrad, it was actually car design. And so in high school, I would draw cars and obsess about it. And that was again and again and again. And somewhere down the road, I kind of inherently knew that I was more into like holistic designing.
Sure.
And at the time, there wasn't like coach builders. That wasn't a thing. So like I didn't want to end up becoming the guy who draws the door handle for the for the Ford Probe. Not my thing. Now I think there's more opportunities for holistic design. Anyway, so the way that car collecting, I think cars are always in my DNA. It was I would obsess about the details and everything. I mean, I remember my uncle had a Alfa Romeo, and I was like, what is this dashboard? I mean, I loved all this shit. I mean, that was a part of my life. And so what ended up happening, believe it or not, is a client of mine owed me a ton of money.
Okay.
And actually, no, let's go back. I had a friend from Germany come stay with me, and he wanted me to buy a Mercedes W124 Cabriolet E320. It's like a mid-90s car.
Yeah.
It was like $9,000 for what was a $90,000 car in that time. It was a hand-finished car. They took the car off the production lot and finished it by hand. It's crazy. It was a very rare car.
It's from the period of Mercedes pre-merger where there were no bean counters really, and they were making cars with an open checkbook. You have the Bruno Sacco designs. It was a time in which Mercedes was still Mercedes.
Oh, it was the golden era. And Bruno Sacco designed this car. And he's like, let's get one. And I was like, holy shit, you could find these on Craigslist for $9,000?
Yeah.
This is bonkers. I'm like, let's go for it. And I bought one.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, this is fun. I can own a vintage car. This is interesting. I thought you shouldn't. I thought it's just going to break and give you troubles, and what's the point? And so I still have that one. And then a client of mine who owed me money, he literally came with cash.
Okay.
I mean, this is in a suitcase. And I'm not kidding you. And I was like, what do I do with this? I'm like, this is, man. I was like, what is it? And I was like, what am I gonna do? I got a safe deposit box and I put it in the bank. And like, I'm not gonna, I don't know what to do with it. And I said, you know what? Maybe this is time for one of my childhood dreams to happen. And it was before the era of everybody buying 911s. I would say that, So when I say a lot of money, not compared to a lot of money today at all. And I ended up finding one in San Francisco. And funny enough, it was from a collector that had the 930, which was the turbo. And he's like, I don't need the narrow body anymore. And I like the pure narrow body. That was my thing. It had a lineage. It wasn't molested, as I would say. I like original design, not updated in a way. And so I was like, wow, this is a great opportunity. Bought it sight unseen.
I've done that a few times. That's fun. Isn't that fun?
We'll go through this, but more of my cars were sight unseen, just gambles. And I'm like, forget it. Let's go. Let's have fun. And so the car came in. I was like, this is an incredible piece. And that's I think the collecting bug got started, and it just let loose.
It's fun to let loose, and I have to share a story with you. So obviously I met you through Paul Zuckerman, who's a good buddy of mine, but like when he was telling me about you, I was like, oh man, I got to meet this guy. But I really didn't know any of your cars. And I know, and now knowing you, that you did the, what was that? Was it Petrolicious?
For Porsche?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anywho, the point is, I'm driving home one day. I'm in my car. I'm the kind of person, I will stop my car and take photos of other cars because I just love cars that much.
I get it. Me too. Yeah.
So anywho, I'm driving down Robertson, okay? I don't know if you know this.
No,
I'm driving down.
I'm listening. I don't. I'm like, where's this gonna go?
I'm driving down Robertson, and I see the most beautiful G-Wagon parked on the street. And I remember like it was yesterday. I got out of the car. People thought I was crazy, and I'm in my Porsche. So like, I think it's kind of like this guy's obsessed. I walked in the middle of the street. I'm like getting photos of it. And I posted it to my personal account. And someone was like, isn't that Dan's? And I was like, I don't know. I just thought it was an amazing G-Wagon. And so that was a fun kind of like
that's cool
story.
That's
and
cool.
I don't think you know that.
No, I didn't know that. No, I didn't know that. And the G-Wagon was, again, another one that I bought sight unseen. And I have to say also, I think before it became like, I think everybody's now trying to import them and doing that thing. And I did it during COVID. And it was crazy. And then, and I found a really pristine, it's a G320 that came from Japan, actually. So it has a little AMG sticker on the back, because the AMG was the one who was importing them into Japan. And by way of Germany, it came back to Europe. And I was like, this thing is sick. And
it is. It's really sick.
And I always liked. You touched upon it earlier. I liked like the original ones, know, and the first ones, the utilitarian ones. They made sense to me. This doesn't even have a V8. This is an inline six,
right?
190 or 210 horsepower, however you calculate it. And when I bought it, it was totally pristine, silver and black, which I think is a quintessential Mercedes colors in a way. And I kind of did like my own version of a backdate, you would call it. And, I made it. I always liked also the Defenders.
Oh yeah,
the Defender 90s, but they're total junk. And so sorry whoever has one, but they're tractors compared to this.
I don't think anyone would dispute that they're very difficult to maintain.
They're tractors, and I wanted a car that you could drive.
Yeah.
And so, but I also liked some of the ethos, some of the like that farm look, that tractor look, that know. And so I tried to combine the two. And so I found cues from older G-Wagons, and I kind of made my own thing happen. And I love it, and it's one of those. It's a perfect car. One thing people should think about in size, it has the same footprint as a BMW E30.
Yes.
Which is crazy. It's taller, obviously.
Yeah.
But and an incredible turning radius. And potholes, who cares? Like everything, it's incredible. Like that part I didn't know until owning and driving one.
Yeah.
And I understand. I do understand why people are obsessive about him. There are pretty much just such a good daily car, and especially this is the short wheelbase one, right? It's tiny.
Well, it's a great car for LA, and I think that's a good point. Potholes. So driving sports cars around LA is a nightmare. There are places, Dan, like roads, I will not go on them. So for instance, on La Cienega between Olympic and Pico, I won't go there. I will go around and then come back onto La Cienega.
I'm surprised there isn't an app like track the potholes or something.
Right.
Like somebody's like posted them all.
And then further down La Cienega, there's like a bridge, and then kind of
they're doing
and it's kind of you just fall off the road.
Oh yeah, it's crazy.
And
there's one right now on San Vicente and Olympic. I mean, it's a wheel breaker. Right. I mean, I had a 7 Series BMW that I went through 3 rims here.
Yeah.
I was like, what is going on? I'm like, again and again.
It's insane.
It's insane.
So I think there's something special about being able to drive a vehicle where you're just like, I don't care. A pothole? It'll in the steel rims.
Yeah.
I mean, it's in a thick sidewall.
Yep.
That's actually one thing as I want to dive into Corvettes. So I have a C5 Z06 now, and it runs 17-inch rims on the front with a 40 sidewall. So like it feels like magic, right? Pothole, I won't go over potholes, but like bumps, no problem.
Yeah.
Whatever. It's really nice to have that thicker sidewall. Yeah. But I know that you like Corvettes too. And I want to talk about this because a lot of times, quote unquote, Porsche guys, and I'm not saying you're a Porsche guy. I think you're just a car guy. They only like Porsches, right? They're very focused. I think you like Corvettes as well, right?
I do. The funny thing is, I just realized that Paul McCartney, when he comes to LA, he has a house here in LA. He has that same generation.
No
Corvette.
way.
Yeah, he does. I think it's white. I'm trying to remember, and I've seen him driving, and he talks about it. He's like, I love that car, And it's an old one, you know. It's
Yeah.
not, and he's just. I don't know. I would love to understand the story of how he ended up with that car. If it was gifted to him, or he just decided to go to the showroom and buy it. It's interesting, but yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I like cars. It doesn't. You know, I used to have a Mustang too. You know, an SVT Cobra.
I had a Mustang.
You know, it was a fun car. It was, you know, it was a live axle, dangerous, freaking. I don't know how I survived it. I spun that thing out all the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and it's exciting. I mean, it's exciting. And it's especially exciting to see what Corvette has done through the years and to pack so much technology into such an affordable package. It's incredible.
It is incredible. And I think going back to like 2003, so roughly in 2003, the one I have cost like $52,000 at that time. And, you know, in 2003, the 911 costs way more than $52,000, but very similar performance. You know, at the time it was 0 to 60 in 4.0 seconds, which I don't really care about 0 to 60s. I'm just giving the stats. And 405 horsepower, 400 pound-feet of torque. It weighs 3,200 pounds. This thing is a rocket ship, Dan. You got to go for a drive in it. I put fresh rubber on it finally because it came. So I got the car with 1,800 miles. So it came with original tires.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Oh, well, I put on 1,000 miles since then. But yeah, it is a rocket ship. It is so fun to drive. And with these new tires, it is insane.
I'm sure.
It's insane.
I'm sure.
All right, E30, BMW M3. To me as a kid, because, okay, so my dad's a big car guy, right? That's how I got into cars. And he had a 6 Series BMW, like I think it was an 89. It was a 635.
Yeah, I know, 635 CSI.
Yeah, exactly. And we used to go to these, I forget what they're called, but like whatever the BMW like big show is. One time they had it at the plant in South Carolina, and we went. And I remember being so intrigued by the boxy nature of the E30 M3. And even to today, like we were admiring it in the garage before we started filming. And like the design is so good. All of it. It just is so good. Like what happened to BMW?
Well, I don't know. You're talking to the wrong guy. But okay, so the E30 was actually the car that I drew in recess again and again.
Okay.
The face of it, I just remember it by heart. You know, it's crazy. Yeah. And the only way I even got this car was through a friend who said, somebody is selling it. He needs to sell it.
Yeah.
Go meet him.
Yeah.
I took my friend Byron and I said, look, you want to go to road trip up to Bay Area? Sure. We ended up there. And the first thing he says is, don't do it. Because he saw some like paint work that needed to be done. He's like, and he's not into body, but he's into mechanics, you know? And I'm like, okay. And he's like, let's go for a drive. We went for a drive. He's like, do it. I'm like, okay. And I just came back to the guy and I said, let's do a deal today. It's like I could go to the bank and it's whatever you want. Let's make it happen. He's like, okay, great. And that's how I ended up with another like childhood dream. And I think it was insane. But it was purposeful. You know, it was form followed function, and that, you know, that was BMW. That was there. Now, okay. Let's fast forward to today, and I know there's a lot of hate, you know, but I would say this. I would bet you, if we go back 20 years from now, let's sit down. We'll sit down somewhere else.
Okay.
And we'll look back, and you will see how BMW, again, shaped the future of car design. And they are a modernist company, and I admire it so much, because they are the ones creating the future. Okay, so, let's go back to Chris Bangle and the Bangle butt that everybody freaking hated. It was the worst thing ever.
Yeah, people hated it a lot.
Guess what? Every company copied it.
They
Everything.
did.
You could see a Toyota Solera Camry had it. The S-Class had it. Okay, great. Everybody hated it. Everybody copied it. The BMW i3, when that thing came out too, everyone's like, what is this? Abomination. Well, guess what? Everybody's copied the C-pillar, the way the car just like kind of flies in the back. Everybody. I mean, from down to Lexus to a Chevy Bolt, they have that. So, no. I think the interesting thing about car design is that people that appreciate cars or people that look at cars are so stagnant and expect a very minor evolution and not revolutions. And so when things really change, they're like, oh, this doesn't look right. Oh, this doesn't. I'm like, okay. I am fortunate enough that over the years, I've been able to make some amazing friends and some amazing friends now in automotive design.
Yeah.
And I was invited last year to BMW Design Works. I got to put on some AR stuff and see things into the future. And that to me is an insane honor that they would even ask me, like, I want to hear your
Yeah.
I was like, this is crazy. Again, I'm a boy that came from a town, a little tiny town. You know, it to me it doesn't comprehend still. And I saw what the future is going to be. It's pretty exciting, guys. Like, and again, I think BMW is doing it right. I mean, their interiors are so ergonomic. The software on the computer stuff works. So yes, drivability and everything else is like that is changing.
Mm-hmm.
And people have to understand it too. Cars are by and large becoming driving computers in a way. Okay, appliances or however you and I actually just saw this. Somebody talked about Tesla too, and I don't have a lot of great things to say over there, but they did understand the clientele. And the clientele, look, they're selling the same car for 10 years,
right?
But new features,
yeah.
And people want that.
They do.
And I know people that buy it, a ton of them. And now BMW isn't really doing that. It's straddling the two. And the other thing is that I think people don't understand about BMW. It is one of the smallest independent car companies that exist out there. It doesn't have a Daimler Chrysler behind it or a Ford or a GM conglomerate behind it. It's a small family business still, which is crazy.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. They are actually thinking, and this is why I admire them, they're actually thinking about sustainability deep down in their roots. So the i3, the i8, those are made out of parts and that can be recycled and disassembled. You look at a Tesla, it's just literally built in an old GM Pontiac Toyota factory with a glued on electrical battery, right? You can't disassemble this car, and it's not made ecologically friendly. Yes, the new ones I know are coming out are going to change that, but by and large, they've been, selling us cars for 10 years that are not ecologically friendly.
Listen, Dan, I have nothing at all good to say about Tesla, so let's move on.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to focus on one last car that I want to highlight that to me is like a childhood defining car, kind of like the 993 is.
Okay.
Well, it's the 550.
Oh, okay.
The 550 Maranello is so pivotal in my life because it is so beautiful. It's one of the first vehicles that I really thought, like, man, that design is just so good. The long front nose, the intake in the hood, the kind of short tailored rear end, moving into the interior. The beautiful, you don't always have to get Daytona seats, but that kind of the Daytona, what would you call those?
Yeah, they have the Daytona seats.
Yeah. The gated manual, which by the way, the 550 is the last front engine Ferrari to be manual only. That's special. Okay. It's a special vehicle. Hey, I could gush about it all day.
Yeah, no. And honestly, I try, it's not something that, I don't know. I look at my it's crazy to say, but look at my collection, and I think I tried to hit on a way that these are like the last of the generation, or
you can see that for sure.
You know what I mean? Like, okay, so the 87 G50 911, again, it's like after that, yeah, you could get a 964 with an automatic. I didn't think about it that way. Yeah. It changed, right? That was like a really mechanical car. The 993 is the last air-cooled. That's it. Everything changed for Porsche after that. That's the end, that was an end of an era. The G-Wagen too. This was like the end, and the W124 E320. Again, Bruno Sacco, the Mercedes of Mercedes. It's these. I think, I don't know, these are the moments, and we're, of the same generation. We got to live through that.
Yeah.
And I think the interesting thing about the 550, I'll tell you. So I was actually a lot of time looking at the 456.
456 is great.
It's great. However, there are inherent problems with the car. Yeah. It doesn't drive as well. It does mostly come in automatic. You have to seek the manual and then pay for that. Like, why would you do that?
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, I always knew about the 550, but I saw kind of like a dip in the market. That's like literally how it happened. I was like, why is this one such a good buy? The 575 is ridiculous. You find a manual 575, you're paying almost double.
Well, because they didn't, this,
I know it, but why go there? But
Yeah.
it's really funny to me how people obsess over that. And I'm like, guys, you have this kind of deal right here with the 550. And again, a sight unseen, kind of a gamble, and I like to do this.
Yeah.
I found a left-hand drive 550 that was a Belgian car in England.
It was in England.
It was in England.
Wow.
And it was a hell of a deal because they didn't want a left-hand drive. And I'm like, just drive it over to Channel and sell it in France. You know, just sell it in Belgium. I don't understand it.
Yeah.
And I discussed it with the dealer, and I said, let's go for it. And the car came.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa. And I think that's when it was like, this is crazy. This is a machine, V12 and all this, the gated shifter, the sounds it makes. It's I think, the last Ferrari. Like in of the essence of Ferrari to me. Obviously there's amazing driving new Ferraris that drive way better than this thing. Okay, but the ethos is totally different, and the aluminum body that's handmade, that front nostril is insane. When you look at the hood of how that's made, it's crazy. You open up the bonnet and you look at all the parts; they're all metal. The air intakes, the air filters, the boxes for those, they're metal. It's crazy. There's channels for all the wiring. They have these beautiful covers with little screws, all metal. It's just, I don't think Ferraris are built like that anymore. That's it. Like it's done differently. Yeah,
and I think a lot of times people, because I can't remember who I was talking to, but I was talking to someone the other day, and they were saying, they were asking about the 964, and they're like, well, yeah, but the interior is not great. And I'm like, well, what does that even mean? The interior is not great. The interior is beautiful to me. Beautiful. It's simple, but that's just of the period. So like Ferrari right now, okay. Your 550 is very simple. It's just maybe the climate control, radio, gear shift. That's kind of it. I was watching, because I like F1, I was watching Drive to Survive, and they were showing the modern SF90. I don't know if you know that one. Of course. And it's just like screens everywhere. Yeah. Everything's haptic. I'm like, this is a Ferrari? Like, so I think there's something special about the analog nature of these last vehicles, and like, they will be timeless. All these screens, all these haptics, they're going to get better. They're going to change. So then you're going to have old tech. Yeah, it's old tech to only have a gear shift and climate control, but it's timeless.
It's timeless. No, and I do think the 550 is a timeless silhouette too. And actually, to be frank, I think the 575 is uglier. There's slightly little changes in it that I think are not necessary, and especially on the interior. And they moved the tack to the middle to be like a Porsche, and they glorified it. It's got extra glitz, extra things. I'm like, why they do that? And there's some other little bits on the interior too that they changed, and I'm like, and then the nostril it has next to the fog lights, it looks like a sad frog, like in the front. Like it does. It's just like, it's like that Stad guy. It has that look in the front. And I think the 550 is beautiful. And then people will say, well, no, the 575 handles better. I'm sure it does. But guess what? They're both GT cars.
Right.
That my 993 will demolish in terms of like fun of drivability. So does it really matter? Right. And so I don't know. I don't like trends. And I don't like when people start obsessing over this one particular thing because that's what you need to, this is what you need to have. I'm like, maybe not. Yeah. And actually, you know what? People gave me shit with my 993 because it was a 4S. And they would look at me, why didn't you get the 2S?
Right.
Guess what? It was on purpose. Yeah. This is what my car is. You want a 2S? You go buy a 2S. This is me. I had the G50 and it wandered in the front, okay?
Yeah.
And people will tell me, oh, well, it's not a true Porsche experience. I'm like, okay, then you know what? I'm not a true Porsche guy, maybe. I don't know. I'm the one that ended up doing collabs with Porsche and did videos with Porsche. So I don't know. I have a feeling that I do get the Porsche ethos. Yeah. And there's a thing for everybody. And they understand that too. Not everything has to be floppy. Not everything has to be that way, right? I mean, and to be, I would love a new GT4. And some people will be like, well, that's not a Porsche. Well, guess what? It is an amazing Porsche.
It's an amazing Porsche.
I love the GT. Fan. I'm a huge fan too. So like,
huge fan.
Does that make me not, like, do I have to have the engine in the back and struggle throughout? No, you don't. I don't know.
I think everyone always has their opinions, right?
For sure.
And when it comes to cars, there's a lot of opinions. And, obviously we align on a lot of stuff. But like, I appreciate your perspective on BMW, and it's had me reconsider. But like, we're not going to agree on everything.
Don't need to.
I think when people, and it's kind of with the Corvette thing, and like maybe I'm sensitive, but when people have these like massive stereotypes that they just put out, and it's just like, okay, you don't get it. If you drove my Z06, you would be a Corvette guy.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I'm not saying you, I'm saying like the figurative.
No,
view.
I understand that. And you know, I actually commend you for your authenticity in getting what you want.
Yeah.
And that's it. You
That's
know,
it.
And, I mean, people say the same thing too. Like, isn't red a bit much? I'm like, actually, no. I think I'll tell you why red. And to me, it's okay. Black is stunning. White is stunning. And those to me are neutral colors in a way. And to me, red is the neutral color. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but like, look at my logo. It's white and red and some black.
It's gorgeous.
And that's it. Like, to me, it is, if you had to choose one color, it's the color. And that's why, you know? And so, yeah, and those cars, you know, you look in the 80s, those cars were like extravagant in red, right? And then I think the funny thing is the Ferraris in black. But the reason is that it's, for that silhouette, I think it's too loud. I think it's too big of a car. It's not a racing one. I don't know. And it was purposeful. But people will be like, oh, don't you should you need a Ferrari. It has to be in red with a black inside or tan. I'm like, dude, you go buy that car. You know, you drive that car, not anybody else. And I don't know. It is personal, and I think it's important that. I don't know. I think it's sad. Sometimes you look online and you see people like wanting to buy something because it's the it thing, you know.
That's a big thing.
It's a big thing, and I you know, that's not going to complete you. You know, no matter what you buy, I don't think it ever satiates something. But it does, to me, each one of these has a personal touch point of my life. Even the 993, I went to USC in undergrad, and there was a Riviera Blue 993 at downtown Porsche parked there.
Coupe or convertible?
Coupe. It was, and it was just sitting there for a year. I think they were waiting for somebody to buy it, right?
Yeah.
And I just, you know, stop the car, get out and look,
Exactly.
literally. And I was like, this is crazy. And then, you know, people will be, and that's how I wanted the 993. Like this was, and again, I think it's the epitome of air cooled. And then people will be like, no, it's the 964 before they ruined the design. I don't think so. I love the car. And I love the technical aspects about it too.
Absolutely. You know, Dan, this has just been such a treat. And on Paré Paré, we always like to talk about design, cars, architecture. I say this a lot, but truly, I think everyone will see this. Like, your passion for these things and your knowledge, it's so infectious. And we've had such a great time being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on.
My pleasure. No, it's when you asked, I said, of course. You know, I knew we were going to have a great chat.
This has been so fun. So at the end of the episodes, we'd just like to say, cheers, Paré.
Cheers, Paré.